So Apple just had their annual September event and they introduced 4 new iPhones as usual: the iPhone 14, the 14 Plus, the 14 Pro, and the 14 Pro Max. While the 14 and the 14 Plus are donning nearly the same design as the 13 with upgrades to the cameras and the brightness of the display, the 14 Pro and the 14 Pro Max are donning the new pill-shaped cutout, which they're calling Dynamic Island. But what of these newly announced iPhone 14 features are actually useful?
I'm Arnell with Ardently Tech.
And I'm Adrian from Ardently Tech.
We believe that tech was made to make our lives easier, and we're here to help you understand and discover that tech that improves our lives.
We believe at least 6 of these new features from the iPhone 14 and the 14 Pro actually do that. So, let's talk tech.
So kicking off this list with what I think is the most useful feature on both phones is the new crash detection feature. This uses a bunch of gyroscopes, GPS, improved internal mechanics to basically calculate if you've been in a crash. It'll determine how fast you've been, and if you come to a sudden stop, it'll determine all this kind of stuff on the back end, and it'll actually get you emergency service help if you can't respond, and it'll actually notify your loved ones, your favorites, whoever you need to contact if you've been in an accident. So it does all that stuff on the back end for you automatically, if you can't. The second biggest feature is the brighter screens. Now, it's kind of a given that every year these screens will get improved, but this year with the screens being at 2000 nits of brightness, that means you can actually use it with a full, sunny day behind you, and you can actually see the screen, you can actually use everything without having to do the whole, covering the screen thing to block the shield, to shield it from the sun. It's actually very useful. So that way you can actually, imagine you're at the beach taking a picture of the family, or you're out at the park, and the sun is too bright, so you're just hoping that you actually got a good picture. You can actually see and angle up the camera, so that way you can actually take a good picture, be able to see everything, and make sure that everyone and everything that you want in the picture is in the shot. Which leads to our next point about the cameras. Now, the cameras on the phone, specifically the selfie cameras, are really improved with a improved 12 megapixel camera that actually has an autofocus motor. So now it'll actually autofocus on you and blur out the background a little bit better, so that way you have a lot more dynamic shots for your selfies. Which leads into a bigger discussion on the cameras.
As for the cameras on the back of the phone of the iPhone 14 Pro, the telephoto lens and the wide angle lens are still rocking a 12 megapixel camera, but the main lens is now rocking a 48 megapixel camera. But from what I can understand, you can only use all 48 megapixels if you shoot in ProRes. Otherwise, you'll just take a photo in 48 megapixel and I think it gets condensed to 12 megapixels. I think that's what I understood. I could be wrong. These new upgrades also benefit those who are interested in using the cinematic mode in 4K and shoot in 24 frames per second. While you had cinematic mode on the 13 Pro, you were limited in the frame rate, and I believe you can only record in 1080p. But now you can shoot in 4K and shoot at 24 frames per second, which for some people that's really important, so that's really cool. But the two most useful parts are actually the new action mode and the adaptive flash. This new action mode is basically going to stabilize any footage that you take in that action mode, but it's going to crop that image a little bit. If you're going to use this mode, just make sure you frame the shot well so you're not cropping out things that you don't want to crop out. But the new adaptive flash is really cool. I've seen some images from some creators who have had their hands on the new iPhone 14 Pro. The flash on the iPhones have always been pretty decent, but this one is really next level. So I'm not really sure why it's not being talked about more. If you see this image here from Mr. Who's the Boss, while it's not comparing the new 14 Pro versus the 13 Pro or any previous iPhone model, it's a pretty significant difference between the 14 Pro and the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra. So if I'm using flash, I would consider that pretty useful if it's going to make my images that much better. The next new feature of the new iPhone 14s is actually the always on display. That has been a long awaited thing for most iPhone users. While that's been a thing for a lot of Android phones in the past, always on display has never been a thing for iPhone users. So we're really excited for this. Always on display is basically going to give you all the information you need from your lock screen without using too much of your battery. While always on display might not be for everyone, this is a really cool feature to have just to be able to look at everything at a glance without having to tap your phone to turn it on and see what's new. And the next feature on our list is actually Dynamic Island. While yes, it's a little controversial if this is actually a useful feature or not, from people who have been using this, from creators who have been able to test the iPhone 14 Pro before it released, a lot of them have been saying that while it is a silly name, it is a nice way to use that part of the screen that is not typically used because of the cutout or because of the notch. LG had a phone that had this feature on it. I looked at a video. Shout out to Marquez for actually having a video on this phone, and honestly did not look as great as this. So people who are coming to defend LG in this matter, LG did not do it better than Apple is doing right now. They're taking this cutout and making it functional, combining the hardware and the software to make a very great experience. I think it beats the notch by a long shot because I can't do anything with the notch. The notch is just literally in the way, but now this gives it a functional and a nice fluid experience when it comes to using certain apps and certain functionalities like listening to music, using the timer, recording, things like that is gonna look different and look better than it does now. So while maybe you won't use all the apps that it supports, Apple's already working with third-party apps like Spotify to even allow the same functionality as the Apple Music does. So I believe other apps and other softwares are going to make use of this dynamic island in their software as well. So really excited to see that unfold. But for now, as someone who hasn't used it, I think this is one of the best ways to make something that was an eyesore functional. So whether you hate it or not, I think it is a useful thing to do instead of just having a pill-shaped eyesore. Comment down below which feature you think is the most useful. And if we missed one, let us know there as well. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave it a like and subscribe to our channel for more. And if you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy this video here where I share my top 5 must-try new features of iOS 16. Enjoy that video and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.